Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher and this is Presidential Chronicles, a series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the Presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Zachary Taylor and the focus is earning his star. The year is 1835 and President Andrew Jackson is implementing the Indian Removal Act, which gave him the authority to renegotiate treaties with Indian tribes with the primary intent to get those tribes to move from locations east of the Mississippi River to locations west of the Mississippi River. Many didn't want to go, but he really didn't give them a lot of choice, and under duress, a lot of these tribes did sign and agree to move. But not everyone was willing to go. Some tribes, or parts of tribes, were insisting on staying where they were, and they were willing to fight for their land if they had to. This was the case in Florida with the Seminole Indians. Now, the United States had acquired Florida from Spain in 1819, but it was still mostly uninhabited swampland. But the Seminole Indians, at least a number of them, wanted to stay and fight for their land in that swampland, many under the bold leadership of a young warrior by the name of Osceola. But the Seminoles as a tribe had signed the Treaty of Fort Gibson, which mandated their departure. But Osceola and his followers had other ideas. He made the statement to the Americans, "You have guns and so have we. You have powder and lead and so have we. You have men and so have we. Your men will fight and so will ours. Till the last drop of the Seminoles' blood has moistened the dust of his hunting ground." The Seminole War was about to begin, the Second Seminole War. The Americans had defeated the Seminoles in a previous war when Andrew Jackson was a general. Circumstances were different, but the fighting would recur in those swamplands in Florida. Well, the top military leaders for the Americans were dispatched to Florida, but frankly, they mostly failed miserably. They obviously had better firepower than the Indians, but the Indians knew the land and the techniques where they would come out to fight, small skirmishes, duck back into the Florida jungle to fight another day. Very little progress being made by the American military. Now, eventually Osceola was captured, kind of in a disreputable fashion. He actually approached the Americans under a white flag of truce to have a discussion, but he was captured and he was placed into captivity where he died in captivity. But this just angered his followers even more. They weren't going to give up. They were going to continue fighting. It was around this time, 1837, that Colonel Zachary Taylor arrived on the scene. Now, he had not been in a battle really in his military tenure for about the last 25 years, ever since as a young officer he held in the defense of Fort Harrison in the War of 1812. Well, he was ordered by General Thomas Jessup to take about 1,100 men and deliver provisions to forts that had been erected throughout the hostile territory. It was Christmas Day, 1837, when the Seminoles attacked Taylor and his men near Lake Okeechobee. Many of the Americans were killed in the front line in that first volley, but Taylor immediately took command of the field. He quickly regrouped and reformed his men to attack. It was a tense 3-hour battle that ended up decidedly successful on the behalf of the Americans. It was a large-scale engagement, which was rare in this war, and it was also rare in that it was a full American victory, and the nation noticed. Zachary Taylor was hailed as a military hero. The press, Congress, Secretary of War Joel Poinsett pointed things out in favor of Taylor, and he even got a promotion, got his star, a promotion to the brevet rank of Brigadier General. Now, Taylor was pleased of all this recognition, but he was still rather sober on what happened in the Florida jungle, which was reflected in his report to headquarters. According to Taylor, and here I trust, I may be permitted to say that I experienced one of the most trying scenes of my life. And he who could have looked on it with indifference, his nerves must have been very differently organized from my own. Besides the killed, 26, among whom were some of my personal friends, there lay 112 wounded officers and soldiers who had accompanied me 145 miles, most of the way through an unexplored wilderness without guides, who had so gallantly beat the enemy under my orders in his strongest position, and who had to be conveyed back through swamps and hammocks from whence we set out without any apparent means of doing so. This was a very personal engagement for Zachary Taylor, which was one of the things that his men loved about him. He cared. He was hands-on. He was with them side by side. He had no airs. This is why they gave him his nickname in Florida, Old Rough and Ready, and it was definitely a compliment. Well, Taylor was actually placed in command of the Florida operation, where he spent the next couple of years. Victory was elusive, and it was frankly miserable business. He was more than ready to part when his tenure there ended in May of 1840, but that war would continue for another 3 years. Well, Taylor would remain on active duty, but he kind of went into semi-retirement. He was back in Baton Rouge, where he had very few Army responsibilities. He mostly focused on growing his portfolio of cotton plantations, which had done pretty well over the years. He had expanded his investments in property, in slaves, in corporate stocks. He was frankly a pretty wealthy man, especially for someone who had been a military officer his entire career. He also, during this time, added a senior aide to his team. It was a West Point graduate, a captain by the name of William Bliss, who had really earned his trust and became one of his closest companions. Taylor gave him the nickname Perfect Bliss. Now, Bliss would be at Taylor's side for some of the most important battles of his career, and those were right around the corner, and of course a story for another day. That is Zachary Taylor and earning his star. From the life of Zachary Taylor, for more Presidential Chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.